This is Dream Power Radio, the place where your dreams turn into reality. Here is your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman.
Hello, 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 and welcome to Dream Power Radio on the amazing Women and Men of Power Network, the world's leading positive programming network, powered by Raven International. I'm your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman, the Dream Coach. This is a show where we talk about dreams, both daytime and nighttime dreams, and how you can use them to make the internal shift to a life you love. One of my favorite dream quotes is from the late great dream worker Jeremy Taylor, who said, "All dreams reflect inborn creativity and ability to face and solve life's problems." Well, there's never a bad time to dream, but if there was ever a time we were really meant to pay attention to our dreams, this is it. We're facing a time of great unknowns, and we can choose to see it as a time of challenges or worries, or a time for new opportunities and new hope, and how best to navigate this brave new world than through our dreams. To help us do this, I'm happy to welcome my guest, Robert Haas.
Thank you.
Director and past president of the International Association for the Study of Dreams, and among other things, is a board member of the National Institute for Integrative Healthcare and the author of Dream Language. Welcome to the Dream Power Radio, Bob.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, it's my pleasure too. Well, Bob, what are you dreaming about these days?
COVID virus. Well, actually, yeah. So some of my more dramatic dreams haven't been about trying to navigate the situation. Not so much the virus, but as you know, we've had to cancel our conference this year, which is we've never done in 37 years. So, and of course, I'm the conference director. So I've been in the process of monitoring every day the statistics to see whether it's even possible to do it, and dealing with the fact that there's very little official announcements in that time period. And it's just been extraordinarily stressful. So obviously, I've been having a lot of dreams about that. Dreams are our source of resilience in a time of stress.
Well, tell me about just maybe one of the dreams you've had that's given you guidance on how to get yourself through this.
Okay. Well, one was an interesting dream. Part of the problem that we've had is in order to cancel the conference, there's certain contractual things that, we have to hit. And there's also, we need to be really sure about when the virus is going to hit Arizona and how things are going to go. And it was 2.5 months away. So it's a great deal of stress because no one had an answer. It was all projections, or mainly people were the government was afraid to say how long it was going to last. So it was a tremendous amount of stress, and it was a lot of fooling around or clowning around. So I had this dream where I had no shirt on, and I was cold, and I felt exposed, and that I could get the flu that way, which was kind of the metaphor for the way I was feeling. If I keep the stress up, it's going to take down my immunity system. So I was really worried in the dream, as I am in waking life. And so I was in a town, and I went to all the stores in the town, and there were nothing but, stores for vacationers and people interested in trinkets and things like that. And every store had nothing but clown outfits in it. And so, I went around trying to find, again, a shirt, but again, there was nothing but clown outfits. And all the people were trying to get me to dress like a clown or wear a clown outfit. And finally, at the end of the dream, I got so angry, I shouted, "I'm not going to clown around with these folks." And I woke up with this great sense of resolve that, look, we know what's right. We know that this is dangerous to try to encourage people to come to a conference of 350 people in a time period when all the statistics show that the COVID virus is still going to be going on to some degree. And so that morning I woke up with the resolve, I'm not going to clown around anymore. I called all the people involved in making the decision to continue or cancel the conference and just said, look, this is too unsafe. We're not going to do it. So I quit clowning around. And basically, that's what happened with the conference.
I love that, because I love it's such a great example of the wordplay in dreams, and how you just pay attention to, it wasn't just the symbol of the clown, but the clowning around,
Yes.
and how to use that.
There's also a structure to dreams. Dreams really are a source of resilience in times of stress. And dreams help us to learn how to move through a situation and adapt to the waking life situation better than if we tried to think through it ourselves in waking life. And so you can see some of the steps in this. Carl Jung was the first to sort of recognize this structure. But the first thing the dream does is it pictures essentially our emotional trauma, our emotional concern. And so there I was with my shirt off, fearing that my immunity system was going to be taken down. I was going to get the virus. And then what it does is the dream introduces all these alternative ways of dealing with the situation. And it drags the dreamer through it. So here the dream was setting me up to get angry about all these people who are clowning around. It was showing me the perspective of the whole world in the middle of this, not the whole world, but at least, some of the those in power in the United States or in the local governments, afraid to really say what the statistics are telling them. They were clowning around. They were trying to sell us all clown outfits. So we would clown around with them and continue this process. And so the dream shows you this perspective, this new way of looking at things. It provides you a safe place then of testing this out. So, it was dragging me through this process of the dream until I, the ego, finally realized, hey, this is just clowning around and I'm not going to deal with it. And when the ego makes a reversal or a decision to follow the wisdom in the dream, which I did by saying, look, I'm not going to clown around with these folks. The dream will generally then basically emotionally reinforce that decision. And so when I woke up, I felt really good that I'd made the right decision and actually carried it out in waking life. So this process goes through most all of your dreams. Sometimes it doesn't get as far as it did with mine. Sometimes it just shows you things in a new perspective. But that wisdom is always there.
That is so true. I want to tell you about my dreams. When the pandemic first hit, I had a lot of dreams about gardening. Now, I guess you could chalk it up to that. My husband and I were actually talking about putting in, vegetables this spring. So there's that. But I chose to look at the symbolic meaning of gardening because I had this dream over successive nights. These were the same types of dreams. I chose to see, for me, it meant that it's a time for new beginnings, to literally plant new seeds, to get things going. What do you think of that?
How interesting is that? Guess what my dream last night was? All about gardening. Huge plant, beautiful plants growing everywhere. All they needed was to have a little bit more water. It just needed to be water, but they were beautiful, gorgeous plants all over the yard. Isn't that interesting? And yeah, I woke with sort of the same feeling. There's kind of a new beginning here, because even though the virus is disastrous for us, it's causing us to do different things and connect in different ways with people that we hadn't connected with before. And it's making us realize that we are a global community, regardless of whether we try to separate ourselves into different nations and cultures and things like that. There's something that's overlying this that's going to basically get us all. So there is it's hard to pull a positive perspective on what's happening right now. But in some ways, I think when we look back on it, we're going to see that it has changed our culture in some fairly positive ways.
Yeah, well, if we choose to look at it that way, and I think that's what we should be doing, is looking at it as a time to pause and a time to look within and a time to take stock of ourselves, see where we are, and then see.
Well, people are now having to spend more time at home with their families, right? So there are already some things that I think we're learning that will make its way into our way of life, into our cultures, even though we don't consciously want to accept it. So I'm hoping so anyway.
So what does it mean if people are having dreams about COVID-19 itself? Or that's the main focus of the dream.
Well, what dreams, most all dreams are about events in your waking life. Now, there are two parts to an event. There is what actually happened to you in waking life, what happened itself. And the second part is how you reacted to it. It's how you reacted to it that the dream is going to talk about. That part of your brain is what activates when you're in, particularly in the REM state, which are our more vivid dreams are. It's the emotional processing. And you notice in the dream that I talked about, it was all about, there was no COVID-19 in the dream, although it was all about COVID-19. And it was, but it was about my reaction to it and how to change the way I perceive it, how to change the way I can now react in order to adapt better to waking life. That's what it's called, adaptive learning, and that's kind of what dreams do. So if you do actually dream about the virus itself, sure, that will make itself into some dreams. But in your dream about gardening, and in my dream about the clowns, it was more about our reaction and our perception of the situation than it was about the actual virus itself.
Mm.
Another dream I had that was quite funny is I was at the beginning of all this, when people were starting to hoard toilet paper and stuff like that. I was dreaming that I was laying on this vast, almost as far as the eye could see, these big white pillow structures. I was laying on it, and then there was some sort of something that was coming over us all. And I was watching it, and it was watching us. You know, it was an evil something that was coming in to flow over us all. And finally, in the dream, I was laying there on top of these white pillow structures, and this stuff was flowing all over us. Which, obviously, when I woke up, I realized that it was talking about the virus. But I never could figure out the pillow structures until I suddenly realized they were toilet paper. As far as the eye could see. So it didn't say COVID, but it certainly was a virus structure, and it certainly related to the hoarding that was going on with toilet paper.
Well, yeah, I think, but you're also making another point, which I also want to emphasize here, is that dreams can be a lot of fun. You know, they can have people. You know, a lot of times I talk about dreams with people, they think, oh, it's really serious, and we're talking about really, important things, but you can have fun with it.
Yes. I had fun with that when I realized it was toilet paper.
Speaking about having fun with dreams, some people recently, in the past couple of weeks, have been telling me they're having a lot of dreams about Donald Trump as a result of this virus going on. So what does it mean to have a dream about Trump?
It really depends on your attitude towards Donald. Because, obviously he's front and center right now on TV because he's the president. And he has chosen to actually give his own press conferences finally for once. But strange thing with dreams and politicians. Quite often you'll be dreaming of Donald Trump because he is the source of whatever emotional conflict or emotional perspective that you're going through at the time. So you may dream of him with, a very negative dream, which just relates to how you're reacting to what he has to say or what he's doing, etc. Sometimes an odd thing happens, though. Dreams tend to do what Jung called compensate. They kind of try to take our emotional attitude, which is really kind of the stress from that is damaging what's going on inside of us, even though we may validly dislike something Donald Trump said. The stress from that is not good for us. So our dream may actually flip it around and show Donald Trump in a good light, that we wake up and surprise us and go, what? He invited me over to his house, and I was married to his daughter or something like that. And it's like, where did that come from? And so I think it's the function of dreams. One of the functions of dreams is to reduce our stress around a situation. And the reason dreams do that is so that we, when faced with the situation the next time it happens, we can react differently to it. We're not reacting anymore, we're thinking, and therefore can deal with the situation. So if we're so wound up about things that Donald Trump did, which many of us do get wound up about, and it's eating our guts out, our dream may actually provide a compensating scenario. We wake up and we've calmed down. We're not so mad. We're not so angry. That was not to show us that our ideas about Donald were necessary, right or wrong. It's to calm us down and reduce our reaction the next time he shows up on TV, so that we can deal with what's being said and not react to what's being said. So it's one of the most common and most valuable functions of dreams.
Mm-hmm. And also, couldn't another way of looking at it be that, if everything in a dream is an aspect of ourself, that dreaming about somebody like Donald, or dreaming about anybody in particular, is dreaming about that part of ourselves and how we feel about that part of ourselves?
That's right. So he can definitely be brought in to represent your shadow side. It's one of the reasons we get so angry at people we don't like. There may be very valid reasons, to be angry. But one of the reasons is because we see the shadow of ourselves in that person. And so they show up in a dream for us to deal with. And again, it was a theory of Carl Jung, which was one of the other functions of dreams, besides just trying to help us with life situations, is to integrate ourselves, to get in touch with that shadow side and it's sort of a negotiation that goes on in the dreams. It's an interactive tension, as he called it. Try to come up with a way of accepting that shadow side of self so that our conscious and unconscious mind can work together without conflict. Okay, so Trump and some of the things he does can trigger your own shadow inside. For instance, he has a very egotistical side where he likes to brag about everything he does. And that, for a person who also might have an egotistical side and feel overly proud of themselves or whatnot, that may trigger their own shadow. And so they'll dream of Donald Trump essentially to become their own shadow so they can deal with it in the dream.
That is so fascinating. We're going to take a short break now. We are talking with Robert Haas all about dreams, and we'll be right back. When is a car not a car? When it shows up in your dreams. Cars are one of the most common dream symbols. If you don't know why you're dreaming about cars or any image, it can leave you confused or scared. But that dream could be a solution to a pressing problem, or an insight into a solution that's been bugging you for years. Go to my website and sign up for a complimentary discovery session, and I'll help you understand why a dream is a terrible thing to waste. Go to thedreamcoach.net for more information.
Welcome back to Dream Power Radio with your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman.
Yes, and welcome back to Dream Power Radio. I'm your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman, and we're talking all about dreams with Robert Haas. Bob, earlier you were talking about how dreams are a source of resilience in a time of crisis. Could you dive into that a little bit more and explain, so many people having this great sense of fear right now, how can dreams alleviate that fear?
Well, in one way, they do it themselves, regardless of whether you remember them, which is nice to know. Many of us experience going to bed just angry as can be about something or stressed about something. we wake up in the morning and magically that anger and stress is kind of diminished. And that's largely because over the night, our dreams have essentially worked on the emotional response to the situation, as I mentioned earlier, and help to diminish that. And they do it in a couple ways. First, they, of course, place you in the stressful situation. And then they attempt to bring in an alternate way of looking at things. And the dream will then try to drag the dream ego through that process to sort of learn a different way of acting. And the dream is a place that simulates this sort of reality, so you can try out different ways in a pretty safe environment. And for instance, in one example would be an example of a vet with PTSD. Here was a vet that had its horrible trauma in the war, where he and his best buddy were riding in a Jeep. They went over a landmine, the Jeep blew up, and killed his buddy and threw him into a rice paddy. Okay. Well, that night he has a dream. This was the night after he went into therapy actually for this, and the therapist had him go through this trauma. So that night he had the dream because the trauma had triggered it. But in this dream, he was driving in the Jeep by himself. And he heard something in the back of the Jeep tinkle. And he looked back there, and it was a hand grenade. He grabbed the hand grenade and threw it out of the Jeep. And then he continued on. So what the dream had done is it took the trauma and it replayed the parts that it could deal with at that moment. It could deal with the explosion, and it did something what's called mastery. It allowed the dreamer to practice mastering the situation. Instead of a landmine, which he couldn't deal with, it was under the Jeep, exploded, it turned the explosion into a hand grenade, which he could then grab and throw away. So he could practice mastering the situation. And noticed his friend who had been killed, which was the most traumatic thing in the overall trauma. It was so traumatic that he had carried his buddy, whose dead buddy, back to camp over 10 miles on his back, and didn't remember doing it in real life. But in the dream, this segment of the dream decided, look, we're not going to deal with the buddy and his death right now. Let's deal with stuff we can deal with. And so that's how dreams work. They fragment the situation. They deal with pieces that you can deal with so that your stress is reduced when you think about being blown up in the Jeep. When he thinks about that, he's not going to react the same way. And he may not even link it to his buddy's death. So that's what dreams do. And then later on, they'll deal with the issues with his buddy's death. So they're very intricate, and they're fabulous the way they work.
Oh, indeed. That is so true. We've been talking about dreams. You've been explaining, these dreams that you're talking about. But for those of us listening who may have trouble understanding their dreams, could you go over steps they can take to help analyze their own dreams?
Okay. Yes. There's a number of steps, and some of them Carl Jung recommended. I use an approach that's both Jungian and that was developed by a fellow named Fritz Perls. The Jungian approach is called amplification, and you basically look at the phrases and things in your dreams. You look for metaphors, for one, like clowning around in the dream I told earlier. And you look for associations. What is my association with a clown suit? And if you start to define that, you see how it relates to your feelings about the situation in life. But the actually deeper approach, and the approach that really gets at what the dream was trying to deal with, is what I call gestalt, scripted gestalt, or scripted role play. And I I was trained in it, but I simplified the therapy into a 6-question or 7-question little scripted role play, where basically what you do is become something in the dream, something that kind of stood out. And like say it was, say you're walking along and in the dream, and there was a door in front of you, okay? And you imagine yourself as that door. You say, okay, I usually take 3 deep breaths and get into becoming the door. I'm the door. And the first question is, what are you and how do you feel? So, and you answer as if how the door would answer, how the thing in the dream would answer. And I might say, I'm a door and I feel strong and comfortable in this role. Okay, and the next question is, okay, door, what is your purpose? And as the door, I might say, my purpose is to keep people out. And to protect myself and protect what's inside. Okay, the third question is, okay, door, what do you like about being the door? Well, I like that I'm strong and I can keep people out whenever I want to. All right, door, then what do you dislike about being the door? Well, I don't like the fact that nobody comes around anymore. And so suddenly you see a little conflict going on there that doesn't really relate to the door. It relates to the conflict in the individual. And then the last 2 questions are, well, door, what is the worst thing that can ever happen to you? And what do you fear the most? And the door might say, well, I fear somebody's going to come and knock me down. Going to get so angry that I'm standing in their way, they're going to knock me down. And what then is your desire, door? Well, I guess my desire is to become a little bit more open. Okay, so when you ask those questions, you get phrases that are the person role-playing the door, but what's really happening is the conscious ego is over there playing a door and the unconscious is speaking. And the unconscious is speaking about the conflict going in with the person. I like keeping people out and protecting myself, but I don't like the fact that I have no friends and nobody around. That's a conflict in the person's life. So they listen to the statements that were made by the thing in the dream, relate them to the way they feel in waking life, and all of a sudden, bingo, you know what the dream was dealing with. Or, my fear is that somebody's going to get so mad at me and knock me over. Well, maybe I think I ought to be a little bit more open. And you suddenly, in that role play, you're starting to figure out what the resolution is. It's a very powerful therapeutic approach, but it's also a simple approach for using with dreams by just playing the part of the thing in the dream. So that dream had nothing to do with a door, but it had to do with the fellow that was the dreamer's conflict over trying to be so strong to protect himself that he keeps people out, but yet there's all these consequences to it.
Mm-hmm. And would you say, in general, that one of the most important aspects to look at in a dream is the emotional aspect of it?
Absolutely, because that's what dreams are dealing with. They're basically dealing with your emotional response and trying to dampen it so that when you awake in the morning, you've learned something that allows you to better adapt to your waking life situation. That's what they're generally all about. Dreams are about other things too. We have lucid dreams and we have dreams that are slightly precognitive and all sorts of types of dreams. But I'd say about 80% of the dreams are really trying to help you deal with life.
Mm-hmm. Well, we are almost out of time. I just have time for one final question, Bob. How can people find out more about you and your books and your work?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the best thing to do is I've got a website called dreamscience.org, dreamscience.org. And it's a totally educational website. We're not trying to sell anything on there, although there's a couple of books if you want. But what's best is my first book, Dream Language. I decided not to republish the second edition. This thing's a number of years old. I decided to put it online as a downloadable PDF. So it's been completely updated with all the latest research And so if you go on to dreamscience.org, you can download this as a PDF for free. Okay, so that's the best way to get a fairly simple look at some of the very latest research and theories. There's also a number of books on the IASD website. So you can go on to asdreams.org, and there's a couple books that we published with IASD that are also interesting. This one is, this is not the one. Sorry. Dreams That Change Our Lives, which has 100 different stories from people about dreams that change their lives, with every chapter edited by one of our experts on that particular topic. And then there is a 2-volume book that 3 of us IASD authors edited that has over 70 different authors in it, mainly some of the world-renowned researchers, clinicians, psychologists, anthropologists, and artists that built this 2-volume set. So that's the very latest from the experts all around the world.
That's great. Well, Bob, thank you so much for being on Dream Power Radio today. We've been speaking about the power of dreams with Dream Master Robert Haas. I hope you've enjoyed today's program. Until next time, this is Debbie Spector-Weissman saying, sweet dreams, everybody.
You've been listening to Dream Power Radio with your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman. For more information on Debbie or to sign up for her newsletter, go to dreampowerradio.com. This has been Dream Power Radio on the amazing Women and Men of Power Network, the world's leading positive programming network, powered by Raven International.